My name is Irene Wong, and I will be simulating the spread of COVID for Hawaii for 100 days based on the paper Estimating and Simulating an SIRD Model for Many Countries, States, and Cities by Jesus Fernandez Villaverde and Charles Jones, with the behavioral responses suggested by John Cochran on his blog post, An SIR Model with Behavior. I will be running an SIR model that is inverted to account for time variations that capture changes in behavior and policy at different time values, intensities, and locations. This model allows us to simulate values for rates of infections, new infections, resolving infections, and other variables that will allow us to estimate the forecast for contracting the COVID-19 virus. In the previously mentioned paper, we were given equations that we would be able to use to solve for different variables in regards to the COVID-19 virus. Our first equation we were given measures the change in the number of people that are infectious. In this model, B of t illustrates the time-varying contact parameter. Using the same equation for new infections, by subtracting the resolving infections, we get the change in infectious people. This solves for the number of additional people who are newly infectious. The third equation describes the change in the number of people in recovery. By subtracting the cases that have already been resolved from the infectious cases that are being resolved, we get the value for the number of people who are currently recovering from contracting the disease. The fourth equation shows us the change in the number of deaths. This illustrates the number of additional people who have died after contracting the virus. The final equation describes the number of people who have fully recovered having contracted the virus. We can then use these equations and the variables that we solve for within these equations to simulate the SIRD model for Hawaii. The data provided gave us values for S, I, R, D, and C, which are the susceptible, infectious, resolving, dead, and recovered people in our population. The specific data values for Hawaii are shown in the sheet. Cells J3 through M3 show us the values for delta, gamma, theta, and R naught. And our SIRDC values are all shown in cells C11 through G11. We can then use these values to plug into the previously mentioned equations that allow us to solve for our parameters that we will base our simulated model from. We can run our model by using the SimTools iterative process. By selecting the state cell range, the update cell range, and the range where we would like to simulate our values, we create a model where we can simulate the infection rates of COVID-19 depending on our location. The first graph compares the number of infections and the number of deaths. The curve describing the number of deaths can be seen as a lagging curve of the number of infections. As the number of infections increase, so do the number of deaths, but there's a lag as deaths don't occur immediately after the increase of infections. As death rates grow, R naught drops, meaning the value for resolving decreases. When this occurs, the number of infectious people drops. This causes a drop in the number of deaths, and people are increasingly less careful, which poses risks for new waves.